Messages are important. We get them every day, all day, 24/7. The whole time we spend conscious, basically. Somebody's trying to get us to advertise something. Because we all have different experiences and different identities, we all have different ways of interpreting and receiving these messages. In previous videos, we've discussed various intersections of our identities, such as race, gender, and age, specifically childhood, and how they affect our self-perception and how we interpret the messages sent by the media. Today, we're going to go over how the messages sent by the media and our culture as a whole affect LGBT plus people. Let's start with queer men. We're going to define queer men as people who predominantly belong to the gay community, who identify as gay or as bisexual or some other sexuality that isn't heterosexuality. TV shows portray gay and queer men as often as being effeminate, as like, think Jack from Will and Grace, or as being a high-strung type A personality, such as Mitchell from Modern Family. Often, these portrayals are exclusively of white men, so queer communities of color are often not represented at all or very poorly represented. And yet, queer men still receive messages as to what their masculinity should look like, what their body should be. And there's increased pressure to be the good, straight acting gay. Queer men tend to have higher numbers of eating disorders and disordered eating, meaning it may not be a compulsion, but they still have unhealthy habits regarding their diet. There's been an increase in behaviors such as purging or exercising too long or too often, and unhealthy dietary intake, such as not eating at all, or skipping a meal, or just having coffee because that's fine. And when their bodies do not conform to the ideals of which the media has set for them, which they have adopted. And anxiety. So transitions are weird. If you can't tell, I'm a transgender woman. And our portrayals in the media are nothing short of repugnant, awful, bad.
All of them.
All the above. Caitlin says all of the above. In 2009, a trans woman by the name of Calpurnia Adams gave us the 4 P's of trans women's portrayal in the media. These are the punchline. So, ha, she's a man. Gasp, horror, laugh track. Prostitute, see every police procedural ever. Psycho, see every serial killer movie ever. Particularly, Silence of the Lambs is a popular one. What's that other one? Starts with a P, ends with a Psycho. And the 4th is The Poor Thing. This is important because it's really the only time that trans men or non-binary people are often represented at all. And it involves the storyline of the tragic transsexual, essentially. As I said, there are almost no transgender male or non-binary people represented throughout the mass media. There are exceptions to that. Tumblr is a popular place for anybody to be represented. Trans male community on Tumblr is very much thriving, as is the non-binary community. Because we are talking about self-perception and self-image, and the reason I prefer to use the term self-image as opposed to body image is because the trans community, by and large, deals with gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria specifically, is an unease with one's gender. This can be focused on genitalia or certain secondary sexual characteristics such as breasts or hips, or muscular growth, shoulders, hair, body hair, facial hair. And these kinds of things, either the lack thereof or the presence of. The best treatment for gender dysphoria is to remove the distress, so remove the markers that are coded for the wrong gender for the individual. So these can include reorganizing how one presents themselves via clothing and hairstyle and makeup, adopting new pronouns and new names, for medical treatments including hormone therapy and various surgeries, and legally, changing your name and legal gender on your driver's license, passport, and other documentation, or the ever popular posting Tumblr/YouTube timelines of your transition. It can be very cathartic. It is. That's fun. Another effect of the media is kind of the internalized transphobia. When the little representation that we get is focused on the negative stereotypes, and only those negative stereotypes, we develop what is called internalized transphobia. This also applies to internalized homophobia for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and other sexuality. On various confession pages on websites like Tumblr and Reddit, there's often a quick glance will often give you the impression that people are 99% unsatisfied with their lives. So this is in part a reflection of how the people who submit these confessions perceive themselves and being trans in the first place. Race also plays a role in a very important role in this, because trans women of color specifically experience 3 times the level of violence that other trans people do. And this correlates as well to sexualities as well as gender identities. Trans women of color experience violence at a rate that looks more something similar to an active war zone than a metropolitan city. 41% of trans people attempt suicide. 25% of those sadly succeed. And one of the unique messages that trans women and trans people are sent and receive is that our genders are able to be determined by how well other people perceive us and how well we express ourselves. And it is often impossible to meet the standards because, for example, if I present very femininely and instead of wearing jeans and a blouse wore nothing but dresses and skirts, some would say that I am trying too hard, that it's obviously just a sexual fetish, and that no way am I who I say I am. On the other side of that, if I'm only wearing jeans and t-shirts and present in a very, for lack of a better term, butch fashion, those same people would claim that I'm not trying hard enough, that I am obviously not serious about this. This can happen especially with my voice the way it sounds. A somewhat brighter spot in all of this discussion is that often queer women, about 1/3 of queer women report having a negative body image. This is a bit brighter spot because this is actually lower than the rates of heterosexual women, which hover around the rate of 50%. Unfortunately, there's not really a whole lot of research on queer women's body image, or bisexual, or pansexual, or any of the other many sexual and gender identities that are out there. It is important to reiterate that depression and anxiety disorders are common companions to poor self-image across all sexualities and gender identities. These are reactions to the media and to the broader culture and society in which it exists. The messages that we absorb affect all parts of our identity, and they are especially difficult to deprogram when we are unaware of them. So, thanks for watching today. Again, if you were, as in previous videos, if you are suffering from any of the mental health effects described in the first video and in others, there will be links down in the description. Today we're also including hotlines and helplines for those suffering with depression who happen to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Join us next week when we finally discuss ways to intervene and recognize when the messages that we are receiving are harmful. Thanks. Have a nice day.